What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Kevin Jackwitz. This is the Kaged Review, and I'm actually going back to do an actual review of something. It's been a long time since you've actually seen the Kaged Review do a review. But this one I had to do. I had to catch up on a lot of things first. Obviously, for those who don't know, I was gone for like 7 months in a week, something like that. And so I missed out on a lot of stuff that I really was disappointed I was going to miss out on. Mortal Kombat 2, the movie, I was really looking forward to that. Stranger Things, Euphoria, Season 3. Just a lot of entertainment that I just didn't get to see as it was happening. So coming back, the first thing I wanted to check out was Stranger Things. I've loved the series all the way through. I think the great story build up between Eleven and the Upside Down characters, specifically Vecna, towards season 4, now into season 5. It was really, really well done. And so I had a lot of high hopes because so far in this series, they really haven't let us down. And I gotta say, there were some things that I had a hard time with by the end of series 5. And most of that will come down to, I'll just be upfront with it. I feel like with this world-ending cataclysm that they were facing, there were no casualties. I had a problem with that. I had a huge problem with that. Anytime you have a story this big and you're afraid to pull the trigger on one of your characters and kill them off for those emotional moments, you have missed the mark by a mile. There is not one major great story, movie series, television series, nothing that I can think of that really left its lasting impact that didn't sacrifice some of the characters. You have to have those moments. And I really feel like the Duffer Brothers really were afraid to pull the trigger on all of this. So I've got a bunch of notes. I watched the whole season, and I'm not going to do a episode by episode review because it's already in the past. So I'm going to do this one season 5 review and leave it at that. But I will say for the first 3 episodes, I didn't really find anything remarkable. You know, it was kind of same old. You had a Demogorgon coming in and trying to steal Holly, and that was a moment for sure. And of course, her mom standing up and turning into Linda Hamilton from the Terminator for a second before she gets wiped out, and then miraculously survives because they don't want to kill anybody off. You saw some of the build-up at the earliest few episodes where there was this connection between Vecna and Will, and you could see kind of Will's still got a part of Vecna with him, and I like how they were building that up. And so those were a couple of things that I thought were pretty cool in the earlier episodes. But when you get to episode 4, it really started to culminate, and you finally started to see where all of this was going, because there's a lot of plot, there's so much dialogue, there's so much character building when you've already had 4 seasons of character building. They were just really pushing the envelope here. But I will say that I did love, I'm trying to remember the character name, the guy with the braces. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names. But, you know, when they killed Eddie, he was left very broken inside, and he was very hurt by everything, and he didn't know how to process his feelings, and he was very angry about it, and he brought that anger to school, and he kept acting out, and that acting out got him beat up, it got him messed with by classmates, and it turned him into his own worst enemy. But I really like how they did that, though, because I think that that's actually kind of true to nature. I think when you're unable to process things like that, you do kind of act out, especially in anger, when you don't understand the reason, especially, for Eddie being killed, which was his best friend, one of the few guys that he felt he could relate to. I really did appreciate that. But in episode 4, the military compound scene, where they had the Demogorgons fighting the guards, and everything's just chaos, and there's this massive fight, and then you see Vecna shows up and just destroys everything. And I thought that was a great moment. When you see Vecna pop out, you're like, oh my God, here we go. And sure enough, and then you have that face-to-face with Will and Vecna. I thought that was a very cool moment because you know that they're still connected, and Vecna's trying to use Will, and Will is, about to learn that he has more power than he realizes. And that leads into the moment where Will kind of first shows off his powers thanks to Vecna, and he takes out 3 different demigorgons all at once and kind of breaks them and leaves them in a heap like Vecna does to his victims in the previous season. And I thought that was very well done. And now you're looking at Will like, whoa, this dude is like really powerful now. And it's bringing a whole new layer to this whole thing. And I thought that was amazing. Like, that was kind of worth the first 3 episodes being okay and not really going anywhere. I think that the payoff was pretty spectacular. I do wish they had done more with the first 3 episodes. Like I said, there was a lot of character building and emotion and bonding and plot building. And I felt like it was too much. It's like, this is the last season. Let's get to something deep. Let's get to something, that makes me really get invested in, like, this is a fight for survival. And that's just kind of what I was feeling in that. So Henry was just as well done as Vecna. When you actually see Henry, the man, and his story and his backplot, I really thought that was extremely well done. I thought that they really added a layer of like A Nightmare on Elm Street type vibes to this series. They did great with season 4. I thought they really kind of upped that game in season 5 with the nightmare aspect. I really liked it, especially when it comes to like the little kids and him trying to befriend them and kind of buddy up with them. Henderson, that was who I was trying to think of. Henderson, I think somebody in his position really would be torn up. I think emotionally he would just be beside himself. I think it may not have been so popular to make him so emotionally reckless and just physically reckless, honestly. But, when you have that much pain inside you and you don't know what to do with it, I think that's very true to life. So I think that they did a great job with Henderson. I think that bringing Max back was kind of a safe spot. I think it's another character that they were afraid to pull the trigger on because she was a fan favorite at this point, and everybody loves Sadie Sink. I do too. I think she's an amazing actress. But, I mean, she was left for dead, and she was pretty well wrecked. And it just goes to, okay, so you're just still afraid to pull the trigger. You're afraid to kill any of your characters off. And I think you can't be afraid to do that. It was kind of cool how they used her in the dream world while she was still in a coma. But I also think that was just kind of like an easy out, to explain some things to the children without having to get a little bit more intricate and involved with how are they going to get through to these kids. I think it was way too easy to help Holly. And so it was an issue for me at a couple of points. The story has just become a little easier to write now because all you have to do is use Max's character to be able to talk to her in her dreams, and you're afraid to do anything to Max. Which I kind of feel like you already did in season 4, and you just kind of reversed your decision. It's kind of how I felt. I think the cave hideaway was a bit of plot armor for most of the season. Having this place that he didn't want to go into, Vecna or Henry, because it was something he was afraid of in his past. But it really didn't make any sense because later on in the series, he winds up just facing his fear and walking into the cave. Well, why couldn't he do that way earlier on in the season? So you see what I mean by just kind of being like plot armor for me for a few episodes. It just didn't sit right when he just was like, all right, well, I guess I just got to walk in here and deal with it. The wall being a barrier to a wormhole was a pretty cool idea, I thought. I think they do come up with some crazy ideas in Stranger Things, and I know the original season was supposed to kind of like mock like, you know, the old Stephen King movies and stuff like that, and kind of have that vibe, and you know, that's very Stephen King-esque. The whole idea of a wormhole to another dimension where you have all these crazy creatures coming out, that's straight out of something Stephen King would think of. So I wasn't very unhappy with that. I thought that was pretty cool. Nancy and Jonathan. So I think they had some very sweet moments throughout episode 6, I think it was. I mean, really throughout the entire last season. But it was where they were in that room and they were kind of like locked in, and there was the liquid falling down and stuff. You know, they had a really great conversation while they were around the table. I thought it was a really sweet moment, but there was never a moment through any of that that I actually felt like they were in danger. There was nothing in there to sell me on there is something that's going to end their lives in this situation. And so for me, with everything else going on and the build up, it just felt like a subplot that just didn't need to be there. It was a great moment that they could have made a couple of minutes long and then moved on. The fact that Karen Wheeler didn't die after her attack was like, what? When she came out of the hospital, and again, kind of like doing the whole Linda Hamilton thing all of a sudden. Because if you remember her in earlier episodes, she was just this not very great person, first of all. You know, she was about cheating on her husband, not the greatest mom, kind of all into herself. And all of a sudden, she's this tenacious mother who's going to fight to the death with these demigorgons and go absolutely ham. And then when she wakes up out of her coma that she was put in by the demigorgon, she's out there with other demigorgons facing off with them and blowing them up and stuff. And it's just like, what? This is two completely different characters. You guys missed something here. Like, I understand the love and affection and devotion and protection of a parent, but this is just two completely different people. It didn't even make sense. So I really wasn't a fan of that. Throughout the series as a whole, there was a lot of just convenient knowledge, and I'm talking about all the way from, you know, episode 1, you know, to the very last episode. It just, there was a lot of things that people were able to explain either through Dungeons and Dragons or, you know, through science fiction that just suddenly became science fact. And it never really resonated with me. It was just like, how do these people know out of nowhere that these things are true? They just know things about their enemies or the upside down that make no legitimate sense for them to know. And it always seems to work out for them. And that's one of the things that I thought was really, really funny about it was there wasn't a time when somebody just kind of knew something and it fell apart. You know, it just didn't make any kind of legitimate sense. That was never more true with the big plan at the end when Steve, of all people, who Steve, you know, no real science background, kind of proven not to be the smartest guy in the whole group. And he just comes up with this plan to traverse a wormhole with 11 entering Vecna's mind, and the world's kind of colliding together and being able to pause that. I mean, it was based on so many what ifs and possibilities that could have gone wrong in any direction. And it was just like, okay, so how does Steve know that this can happen? How does he know that it's going to work? How does he know that, 11 entering Vecna's mind is going to do anything? You know what I mean? It's like there's just too much convenient knowledge in this series that is based on nothing. And that was, I think, a problem that I had throughout the entire Stranger Things series. I I like there to be at least some kind of rationale to it. And in this case, there wasn't a lot. I hate to say I couldn't care less about Will coming out scene, but I've always thought anyone who defines themselves by their sexuality probably shouldn't be defining themselves that way. I don't care if you're gay, straight, whatever you are, it doesn't matter. Your sexuality doesn't define who you are as a person, good, bad, or indifferent. Irrespective of what that is, I just feel like it's superficial and egotistical, honestly. I will say, however, that the scene in particular was done really well. I think Noah Schnapp did a great job of selling the emotion of it, and I think that everybody on board was very reactive to Noah Schnapp's performance. I thought it was a great job with the emotion of it all. I just didn't care about somebody's coming out. Didn't care. In real life, it's never that big of a deal. It's just like, hey, I'm gay, and I'm like, okay. You're still you. You know what I mean? Like, it should never be that big of a thing. And I guess that there are points where people are very short-sighted, and that might change things for some people, and that's very short-sighted. And I guess I can understand that there's a fear in that. But I think overall, people today, they look past that. I don't care who somebody sleeps with affects my life, not at all. You know what I mean? And that's the way it should be. I don't look down on somebody because they think or feel differently than I do. That's one of the great things about the country we live in. But that's a tangent and a side note. Moving on. Nancy taking out a bunch of trained military soldiers was a bit ridiculous. This kind of goes back to the whole Joyce, or not Joyce, but what was her name? The Wheeler mother. Her coming out like Linda Hamilton. This is kind of the same concept. Nancy was a high school girl with a whole bunch of problems with boyfriends. You know what I mean? And now here she is holding machine guns and taking on a bunch of trained military men? No. That whole thing just ran so ridiculous to me. The end of episode 7 was pretty cool. I was kind of like, all right, here we go. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a ton of action. And for a final season, there were some cool moments and maybe one really intense action sequence throughout all of this with the soldiers and the Demogorgons, Vecna and Will, all that. Other than that, it's been a lot of character work and exposition. One thing that I kind of had question with was, how does Mike, or anyone for that matter, know that this will actually end the Upside Down? How many times have they beaten an enemy and then something happens next week? You know what I mean? But for some reason, they're all positive that this plan that they've come up with is actually going to end the Upside Down and destroy everything. So again, it's just like narration for the viewer to understand what's happening. I always feel like there's always someone super over emotional that almost costs the whole plan. And I get those people exist, but I feel like it's overplayed in movies and series. Hopper breaking the sensory deprivation chamber was just a stupid stall of the storyline. Like, we saw it in Endgame, or actually Infinity War for that matter, when Peter Quill started hitting Thanos, when they almost had the glove off him, when he was put under. And here it's kind of the same thing. You get Hopper acting on pure emotion because he thinks that, Eleven's going to kill herself, and breaks the deprivation chamber, stalls the whole thing, which, he knows what's on the line here. So it just didn't make sense and it didn't ring true. Like, at the end of the day, I think we all kind of understand that there are people who are going to go to a very far length to save that one person, but if they know that that one person and the rest of civilization is going to die, they're probably not going to make that choice, because it would be the same end result, just with mass casualties. So, it doesn't ring true to me. And then I wrote on here, obviously I'm reading my notes, it says suddenly Vecna can walk into the cave he supposedly hasn't been able to get into the entire season. And that's what I was talking about earlier, is in that moment, in that scene, I felt like all of that had been wasted, because here you have this guy who is clearly doing what it didn't look like he could do for the first entire half or 3/4 of this season. It just did not make sense. When it came to Kali's death, I didn't care. She's not a character that's been built up or been there for long enough for me to gravitate and have an emotional hold on. So that whole thing just, I didn't care. And they do that every season. They did it with Bob in season 2. They did it with Eddie. And here they are bringing her back, who has essentially been there for a season, if you put it all together, if that. And that's the one they kill off. And I couldn't have cared at all. It's the only character that I think they killed off. She wasn't in the series long enough to have any impact. And that was something I had issue with, because that's what they do throughout the series. They'll add somebody and take them out 1 or 2 seasons later. There were several moments between Jane, Eleven, and Hopper that were very emotional and fine for the television series, but in the end really meant nothing. And I'm going to get to that in a minute, and I'm sure those who have seen the end of the series know what I'm talking about. Because just like every other character, they were afraid to pull the trigger. When you get to the final showdown at the end of the season, the final showdown for the entire series, Vecna's lair turning into the Mind Flayer was pretty sick, not gonna lie. That was very well done. It was kind of surprising when you saw the legs come down and him come out of the ground. I thought that was pretty sick. 11 ripping through it to get to Vecna, who was inside the Mind Flayer, was pretty sick too. I still don't buy into Nancy's Sarah Connor turn. And I think Natalia Bayer is great. She's beautiful. She's talented. But I just didn't get the superficial schoolgirl turned into warrior bit. I just didn't get it. I didn't necessarily care for Joyce Byers getting the kill in the end either. So I thought everything with the whole crew trying to take out the Mind Flayer and burning it up, that was great. Hurting Vecna so that they could hurt Vecna with inside the Mind Flayer, I thought that was cool. Once they finally took out the Mind Flayer, 11 impales Vecna. You have everybody else walk in, and then it was Joyce Meyer who winds up getting the kill. And I felt like that was the wrong choice, because this whole thing has been about 11 and Vecna. Like, that's been the build-up for the last 2 seasons. And I really felt like they should have just let it be 11 and Vecna. I understand why Joyce Myers would be a great pick, because, you know, the whole Upside Down has been messing with her family since the beginning. But I just don't feel like that was the right choice. I feel like they really missed the mark on that one. I feel like 11 should have had the kill on that. They had some nice callback flashbacks showing people that died as Joyce was cutting off Vecna's head. You know, you got to see glimpses of Bob and, of course, Eddie and other people they had lost, or other big moments that have happened, you know, throughout the whole series. And, okay, that was cool. When it's all said and done, you have Eleven standing inside the upside down that they're about to blow up. And she has this mental telepathy moment with her and Mike where they're having a conversation, and she's saying that she's going to sacrifice herself, and he's saying, I don't understand what you're doing, but she's saying you will. I think Millie Bobby Brown has been a phenomenal actress from a very young age. Honestly, when she was younger, she had an incredible emotional range, just leagues above most actors at her age at that point. And so she's only gotten more mature with her acting since then. I mean, she's just phenomenal. She's got great range. I think she carried that scene. I think Finn Wolfhard is great, but I don't think he had the emotion for what was happening at that moment. My big issue with this is the huge cinematic moment meant nothing. They blow up the upside down. 11 looks to still be in there. But they couldn't pull the trigger on it. And we're going to get into that because when they went back on it, it irritated me because nobody of importance had died. So the Duffer Brothers were clearly afraid to pull the trigger on any of their main characters, and I think that's the worst decision they made. In a story like this, there has to be casualties, and that's just the beginning and end. Those are major emotional beats you have to have. They couldn't even pull the trigger on 11, which is why I think all the moments between Hopper and her were useless. So after this big climactic finale here, there's like 45 minutes of aftermath. P.S. I think Fleetwood Mac's Landslide was a great song choice to start that aftermath sequence. Probably as good a choice as Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill. Henderson's valedictorian speech was amazing. His big FU to the school and the principal was great. I think they did spend a little bit too much time with the characters afterwards. You had, I think it was, let me try to get this right here because I'm terrible with names. You had Maya Hawke's character, and you had Natalia Dyer, you had Jonathan, and Joey Curie, I think it was, all four of them, and they're talking about what they're going to do with their lives and talking about coming back, I think it was once a month to town to, spend a night, get some drinks, whatever it is they're doing. And then you go to the main cast, back to D&D with Max, and they're telling the story of the game, and then Max was like, what? That's it? Because they beat their enemy, and he gives this lame little speech. And then Mike starts making up a story for each person there, for Will and Henderson, and Caleb. And then he starts talking about how 11 didn't really die because she had gained the ability to cloak herself, basically make herself invisible. And so that's what she did. When the Upside Down blew up, she walked out, sneaked out, and then went to go live somewhere on her own. And so it kind of leaves this open ending where you don't really know if 11 died in the Upside Down or walked out. And I get that. That's what the Duffer Brothers were looking for with that. But that goes back to everything I've been saying throughout this whole review, is they were afraid, I think, of pissing the fans off. I think they were afraid of the backlash that they would have got if they would have killed off one of these characters that everybody loves. But that's storytelling. I'll say it again, when you're in this kind of world-ending cataclysm, you can't be afraid of that. You just can't be. You've got to make those emotional beats, and they didn't do it once, and now one time. And I hate when people are afraid to do that, because that's kind of what resonates. So, take a look at anything that has ever been a major event. You could look at Star Wars. Not that I really care about Star Wars, but how many of their characters have died off, right? Let's look at the Marvel Universe, Endgame, Infinity War. Let's look at, Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. All of these major stories have had major casualties at some point. And I think that that's something that's really missing here. Overall, I did enjoy the story until we got to what I thought was a weekend. I really loved what they did with the first 4 seasons. Thought they were phenomenal. I really liked a lot of what they did in season 5. I do feel like season 5 stalled a lot. I feel like there was way too much exposition. There's way too much plot building, way too much character building. You had 3 or 4 main action scenes throughout the entire season. And that, to me, was a letdown. It just was. And I really think they missed some of the emotional beats. So if I was grading this out of 10, I still enjoyed myself. I don't think it was terrible, but it was kind of a letdown. I think at the end of the day, it was still very well done. It was still some very cool moments. I would give it probably a 7 out of 10. And that's where I'm at with it, so let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. My name is Kevin Jackowitz, Kaged Nation, out.